Introduction. Vote of thanks is Terry.
You do it first.
Yeah. I'd like to introduce the fellows Patrick Griffin, who is an engineer, one of the team that's doing the Crossrail across London. It's very interesting, and I'm sure he knows very much about the background because his army career as a sapper will obviously be held him good stead. So, Patrick Griffin.
We stick together.
Yes, please.
Oh. Are you going to move around?
Yes, we will. We shall move it. See that you have to move it. We shall decamp. I got you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, can you all hear me at the back?
Yes.
Well, thanks for that very nice introduction. Just to very good introduction, so I only said a couple of words too long. I am an ex-sapper. I was a sapper for a full career. After that, I spent some time with the Institute of Civil Engineers, and then when I came to that magic age, the then executive chairman of Crossrail said, "Would you like to come and work for me?" I said, "As long as somebody pays me, I'll do anything." So I went in at Crossrail. I asked, I am an engineer, and I'm not doing an engineering job. What he wanted was someone to work alongside the public relations and organisation who would give an engineering background to what they were talking about. What I've ended up in doing now is I'm the Freedom of Information Officer for Crossrail. So when people write in and ask for things that they think should be made public, it's my job to go and find out that information. People ask questions about why did you let such and such a contract to this firm and can we have the scoring of all the others? Once a year we get the question, can you give us details of the chairman's expenses that he takes? So, Crossrail. What is Crossrail? Well, I'll tell you what it's not. Crossrail is not a high-speed railway. What it is, it's a high-capacity, high-frequency metro railway through the centre of London. Rather like the S-Bahn in Germany, it aims to provide a 10% increase to London's rail capacity. It's got obviously new, greener air-conditioned trains. They'll each be 205 metres long. We originally said we specified 200 metres long. When the Bombardier won the contract, they produced the train 205 metres long, actually 204.9. It came up to 1,500 passengers. That's about 1,000 passengers standing and 500 seating, roughly that breakdown. It goes without saying the stations will be well designed, most importantly, the shorter journey times. Some of the benefits that Crossrail is aimed to bring, it's claimed it will bring £42 billion boost to the economy over the 120 years of the life of the railway. Yeah. We employ 14,000 people during construction. When our chairman speaks, he will tell you we've actually, we provide work for 55,000 people. That's throughout the chain of supply. And 14,000 people are basically people who are working on the construction on site in London. That's not just in the tunnels, that's on the stations in the office. The centre, the core part of the railway, will be 24 trains an hour in each direction in peak times, quite a high frequency, and we enable about 200 million passenger journeys a year. Most importantly, to link those two key business areas, Heathrow and Canary Wharf. And Canary Wharf Group, who run, placed on the right there, who is the centre of the universe, they used the coming of Crossrail as a big selling point for future tenants of the wharf. And they actually have a giant relief map on the top of that pointed tower there, about half the size of this room. Some might have seen it. It has Canary Wharf in the centre of the universe and shows all the rail links, and Crossrail is lit up as a great link. There's some of the journey times there. Current journey times that we reckon from the transport plan. Ilford to Bond Street, about 35 minutes. Heathrow Canary Wharf, about 51 minutes. When Crossrail appears, it'll be reduced to those figures.
Wow.
And the main reasons it's going to be reduced is because you no longer will have to change trains onto the underground. Crossrail services will run right through from, say, Ilford to the centre of London, and particularly important, from Heathrow into Canary Wharf in 40 minutes. Ooh. Big saving, and people want these. People, particularly businessmen, want these time savings. So, quick look at history. Where did it all start from? A couple of people have already asked me this. Where did Crossrail start from? It goes back a long way, as you can see from that picture behind there. Probably even before then. 1830s, London was very heavily built up, lots of narrow streets, lots and lots of traffic. You might say it's not much different today. The only difference is you've got horse-drawn traffic here and everybody's wearing hats. Two big railway engineers of the day, Stephenson and Brunel, wanted to bring their railways into London. They didn't want to stop on the outskirts of Paddington and Euston and St Pancras. They wanted to bring them into the centre. The problem was you had all this dense housing area. You couldn't demolish it all and bring it in. You could manage to demolish the areas on the outside, because that's where the poor people lived. You could demolish their houses. No problem. Tell them to go live elsewhere. The only way to come into the centre was to go underground. And of course, at the time, the only means of traction you had was steam traction. And everybody thought that steam locomotives underground would be totally impossible. People would die of asphyxiation, tunnels would be full of smoke. But also the other problem, horses' hooves are going to go through the road into the tunnel and cause damage to not the railway underneath, but the horses. However, Metropolitan Railway Company decided that it could be done, and they dug up the streets of London for several years, and in 1863, with much celebration and waving of hats, the Metropolitan Railway, the first underground railway in the world, opened from Paddington into Farringdon, and nobody died of asphyxiation. A lot of people got a bit smut in their eyes. They got a bit smoky down there. The drivers were probably the worst, but nobody actually died, and it was enormously successful. And of course, that route, west to east, Paddington to the centre of London, is more or less roughly the same sort of route that Crossrail is following today. So, however, problems didn't go away. London was getting increasingly built up, people being dragged into London all the time, and the railway system built up, the underground system built up following the Metropolitan Railway to the one you know it today, with this great grid of railways, the district railway, the Metropolitan Railway extended its route up to the northwest. And a number of studies looked at exactly how they were going to improve transport in the centre of London. Beginning of the century, well, I mean beginning of the 20th century, the Royal Commission sat and looked at London. They looked at other cities in Europe. They looked at Berlin, they looked at Paris with its wide boulevards. We can do that in London. And the plan was actually produced for two huge new boulevards through London. One, east-west, roughly doubling the width of Oxford Street. The other north-south, probably somewhere near where Tottenham Court Road is today. And they would have 4 tram tracks on the surface and 4 underground lines underneath. And this time, of course, we now had electric underground railways, so that was perfectly possible. If this had been built, there would be no need for Crossrail today, because that problem would have been solved. However, they came across exactly the same problem Sir Christopher Wren came across when he tried to rebuild London after the Great Fire. Nobody came up with the money to buy the property. So that disappeared into a nice leather-bound volume and disappeared into the archives. During the Second World War, when London was heavily bombed, Sir Patrick Abercrombie, name you might remember, to do with housing, came up with a report, but it also included transport in London. And he had this idea of connecting all the mainline stations with underground tunnels so that mainline trains could run right through from Paddington through to Liverpool Street, from Victoria, right to London Bridge. At the same time, he'd remove all these brick viaducts that trains run on through the centre of London and throw up more land for housing. However, end of the war, the biggest priority was housing, not transport, and so the transport side that got forgotten. But it kept resurfacing these ideas of routes through the centre of London, and then we have fast forward to 1989, and a detailed study was carried out, Central London Rail study by British Rail, by the Greater London Council, by London Underground. And they looked at routes east-west, north-south, north-east, south-west, north-west, south-east. And we came up with Thameslink, came out of that. We had the Jubilee line, we had the Victoria line. And we also had Crossrail, an east-west service. Now, you may or may not know this, but in order to get a railway built in this country, you have to have an Act of Parliament passed. And so in 1991, a bill was placed in Parliament to build an east-west route through London. The name Crossrail appeared this time, the first time, but the bill wasn't called then. 1991, we had another of these economic downturns. The government did not guarantee any funding for this railway. So after a couple of years, the Parliament discussed the business case ad nauseum, and eventually it was talked out. However, luckily, the team which had put together the designs and the specifications, some of them were kept as a core group and maintained that expertise and that knowledge, something we're very good at losing in this country, for future use. And a bit later on, this gentleman turned up, a change of government, and set up the Strategic Rail Authority, which looked at, as it says, rail strategy throughout the UK. In particular, we looked at London and the east-west route through London. In fact, you see it's one of the first things, you can't see it from there, but that is actually titled Shadow Strategic Rail Authority. It was actually, the report was produced before the authority was actually established, because it was so important. And they looked at the route through, they looked at all the various alternatives, and a big consultation exercise. And Ron talked about people coming out here to talk about Crossrail in the past. This is this time, round about 2000, 2003, we had this big consultation exercise which took place throughout the route. We went to local authorities, we went into town halls, we went into libraries and explained what all the options were, and there were a number of options of where the route would go. The centre route was fixed, somewhere from Paddington to somewhere near Liverpool Street. Well, rather the same as the Metropolitan line, the original Metropolitan line was. But where it went on the east and the west, there were many suggestions. That it should go out on the west, out to Heathrow, to Reading, to Amersham, to Uxbridge, out on the east, whether it should go down to Gravesend, out towards Shenfield, Colchester direction, out towards Southend. All these were put into the melting pot, and finally came up with the final solution, which was the final route as proposed. The red bit in the centre is a new tunnel section running from Paddington through to Liverpool Street and Whitechapel, splitting under Stepney Green, north-east out to surface by the Olympic Park at Puddingville Lane, and go out to, on the Great Eastern Main Line to Shenfield, the southeastern route coming through to Canary Wharf, round by Custom House behind Excel's Trade Centre, under the Thames, and going out to join the North Kent commuter lines, finishing at Wood, and out in the west, surfacing at Royal Oak, just west of Paddington, join the Great Western Main Line, linking down to Heathrow and ending at Maidenhead. And as you probably know, earlier this year, the government announced that traffic will be extended all the way to Reading when the railway opens, not later on when it opens. The reason it stopped at Maidenhead, the reason it stopped where it does is the further you go out from the centre, the more difficult it is to justify the business case. And there were a number of technical reasons why Maidenhead was the termination point on the west. So everyone says, why didn't you go to Reading? The short answer was, if you want to travel from Reading into the centre of London, you probably catch a non-stop train, express train. Remember, Crossrail is a metro train, stops at all stations. And that was the reason. One of the reasons. So, bill went through Parliament. 2005, it was went for 3 years. It was a hybrid bill, which meant it gave the opportunity for people to petition against the bill, and this could range from Lord Tony Barclay, who was worried from the rail freight group about the loss of freight paths if Crossrail had extra trains on the route, down to Mrs. Smith, who ran a shop in the East End of London, who was worried about access during construction works, and more larger things such as schools who were concerned about construction traffic on the roads, and in Soho Square, around Soho Square, a lot of recording studios, very sensitive to noise and vibration. And all these people put in their petitions to the bill, and they were heard by select committees from the Commons and the Lords, who sat in a semi-judicial process, listened to them, and their mitigations were written into the bill that we have to comply with. For example, our working hours are laid down, we cannot have transport on the roads at the time children are going to school or leaving school, doing their schools. We have to have no transport running on roads near schools during exam times. Where the route runs underneath Soho Square, we have specially designed track to minimise the noise and vibration. But all these were taken into account, and all written into the bill. Most importantly is dust. All construction produces dust. We have a station, Canary Wharf station, alongside Billingsgate Fish Market, very susceptible to dust. Dust monitors everywhere. If we breach any of these conditions that are laid down, the Secretary of State for Transport personally has to stand up in House of Commons and explain why he allowed it to happen. So you can see it's most important we maintain. So 2008, greatly successful. The Queen said yes on the last day of the session in July, and we all went down the path for quickly. That's one issue. And a year later, you recognise the man with the funny haircut there in the middle. May 2009, is launching the pile driver to drive the coffer dam to build the station at Canary Wharf. There's nowhere to build it at Canary Wharf other than in the water. Gentleman on his right there is Lord Tony Adonis, who was then the rail minister, a great railwayman supporter. We're very sorry to see him go from the government, but he has resurfaced in other guises. So, work started very quickly, because Canary Wharf Group was so keen on getting Crossrail, they actually funded, or part-funded, the station there and built it with their own contractors, so they were able to get off the ground very rapidly. So, very quickly, what have we got? What is Crossrail, the construction side of it? It's Europe's largest infrastructure project. We've got 42 kilometres of new tunnels under central London being dug, 8 million tonnes of excavated material to get out. We've got 8 new underground stations. We've got lots of concrete and lots of steel going in to build those stations. And it's going to cost lots of noughts. 14.8 billion. And it's coming from, it's not all coming from the government. The government announced before the bill had completed its parliamentary phase that they would guarantee the funding. However, it's coming from lots of various places around there. But the transport, they're producing about a third. The Greater London Authority and Transport for London, they're producing approximately a third as well. That's based on the fair revenue, expected fair revenue in the future. And then we have industry involved. I mentioned the Canary Wharf Group at the bottom there. It was important to them. They're part funding the construction of their station at Canary Wharf and building it with their own contractors. City of London very important to them as well. They've got two tranches in there, one for their own funds and another tranche which they're squeezing out of city businesses. Berkeley Homes, a developer in Woolwich, who are developing the Royal Arsenal. If anyone's been to the Royal Arsenal at Woolwich, building all over the place by Berkeley Homes, and they are funding the construction of the basic station box at Woolwich. Heathrow Airports Limited, they're funding to the tune of 400 million, an extension to the connection to Heathrow to make better capacity through that link into Heathrow. And not forgetting Network Rail in the middle there, they're providing 2.3 billion out of their own funds, funding, because they're responsible for all the works on the existing route. That is the blue lines on that map. Any track realignment which needs to be done, station lengthening, station improvements, station redevelopment. So that's what we've got to do. There are 90 kilometres of existing route, and there are 28 surface stations to be upgraded, 11 of them major reconstructions. This depends on how much work is done. It depends on the amount of passengers expected to travel through those stations. These figures being change every day, it's constantly changing. Two major stations that are being upgraded or rebuilt totally are one on the east is Ilford, and on the west, definitely Broadway. Most of the other work will deal with existing stations. The lengthening platforms are required to take on new 10-car, 9-car trains. Access, step-free access where possible. Our central stations will have step-free access from the street to the train. The existing stations will have new lifts, they'll have new escalators, they'll have new bridges, better access to the stations. And where possible, and it's constantly, money is coming in from other sources to this, and the Mayor announced recently that all stations within the London area, it's particularly on the Great Eastern Main Line, will now have step-free access if they haven't already got it. In the central section, that's where most of the money goes. Digging these tunnels. We've got the 8 new subsurface stations to be built, running from Paddington through to Woolwich. And we've got one surface one at Custom House. It will be a joint station with the DLR, and that's directly behind the XL Trade Centre. As I'm an engineer, so a quick look at the engineering side of it. Tunnelling, let's say we've got 42 kilometres of tunnels to build. We've been built 8 tunnel boring machines. There's 6.2 metres internal diameter, about 7 metres external diameter. We've got another 12 kilometres of passageways and interconnecting routes to be dug, and these will be dug using mining materials, mining equipment underground, and lined with sprayed concrete. I'll show you that in a second. That's just a quick comparison between the existing underground and Crossrail. As I said, Crossrail is not an underground railway, it's a surface railway which happens to run underground. So compare it with the Victoria line there, which is about 3.8 metres diameter tunnel, Crossrail is 6.2. Average platform, underground platform, Crossrail is twice as long, 250 metre long platforms. Trains twice as long, and obviously more passengers in the train. We used to dig tunnels by hand, lots of them with shovels. Now we have tunnel boring machines. That's the first one being erected. Ours were all built by Heron Knecht in Schwanau in Germany, who basically cornered the world market for tunnel boring machines. And if you imagine, in fact, someone from Heron Knecht gave the best example of a baked bean can, and that's a baked bean can sitting there. And it's got a large cutting disc on the front, and it cuts its way into the soil, and the baked bean can is pushed into the soil, and you excavate the soil inside that baked bean can, and erect your tunnel inside it, and then you push your baked bean can a bit forward into the next bit of soil. In the old days, lots of men with shovels did that. We've got 8 of these. That was the first one. And they're not just a shield at the front, they've got behind them they have got a complete factory. When the cutting disc rotates, the soil is taken up that Archimedean screw, that red Archimedean screw, onto a conveyor belt which runs right out the top of the back end, and right out the end of the tunnel. And behind there, you have got all the electrics, the electronics, the hydraulics, but more importantly, because this is now 5 or 6 kilometres into the tunnel, you can't walk all the way back. So you've got, in there, you've got your restrooms and your toilets for your shift crew at the time, and all the controls. And that's been dragged along. It's about 120 metres long now. It's a travelling factory. So how far have we come so far? Just a minute. I said we had 42 kilometres of tunnel to dig. We've just done over 37 kilometres. We're 86% complete. I'm told this morning they've dug a little bit more. It's now 87% complete. It's still not quite 38 kilometres in. The coloured bits are the bits we've done so far. There's 2 rings of bits we have left. This one has now been completed as of last weekend. The bit in the centre, Whitechapel to Farringdon, started yesterday. Lots of people like to be seen in the tunnels. As you know, next year we have an election coming up. So we always get lots of requests for people to come and say something useful. Not to us, to them, wearing their orange kit in the tunnels. The only trouble is, of course, when they're wearing orange, it's very difficult to see sometimes who they are. But of course, anyone who puts their hat on the side of their head, I think it's always the Chancellor, isn't it, with David Cameron and more, so. I said we've got 8 million tonnes of material. We've got to put it somewhere. We're not all going to put it all in Wembley Stadium. It wouldn't work. What we're going to do is dig it out there. Policy Island, it's Burnham on Crouch at the top of the picture there, as you know, very upmarket sailing centre. But even from that photograph, you can see it's a very flat bit of land. It's been bought by Royal Society for Protection of Birds, and they're going to turn it into Europe's largest wetland bird sanctuary. And I mentioned that at the build stage, one thing you had to do was to, a lot of problems, a lot of people questioned about construction traffic. And so our great aim is to keep construction traffic off the road. And I mentioned it at lunch to somebody here. Where possible, we take all our excavated material by rail and by river. And from the western tunnelling portal, we take it out by rail, and it goes all the way around to Gravesend, loaded onto barges, and taken out to Wallasey. And from the eastern side, from Canning Town, opposite the O2 Centre, goes directly onto barges, down to Gravesend, transshipped, and goes out to Wallasey. And when it's finished, it should be like that. The sea walls around the island will be broken down, and our material will form those bunds and walkways. And some people have asked, why didn't we use excavated material to build Boris Island in the Thames? The short answer is, there's nowhere near enough. And that little island there, our 8 million tonnes, will only do about 3/4 what they want to do. They've still got to get more material from the next project going through London. Okay, we've got tunnels. Obviously passengers have got to get into the train somewhere. Paddington Station, the western end of the Grade 1 listed building, very, very sensitive. And our station is on the left-hand side of it there, Eastbourne Terrace. We have to be very careful with how we work alongside that station. It's basically a concrete box built alongside the station from the top. Platforms at the bottom level there. Ticket hall, circulation area above it, with escalators down from what used to be the departures road where the taxis used to stop, which will now become a pedestrian area. And that's the Grade 1 listed Macmillan House and Paddington Station on the left there. We've got a glass canopy, which is designed to be as less intrusive as possible, so you can still see the building through it. And obviously let in natural light. And where possible, our stations will use natural light to cut down on costs, electricity costs. Next station on, I show this one because it's very Central stations are very similar to that. I said our trains are 200 metres long. Our station platforms are about 250 metres long. And the reason for that is to allow for increase in train lengths in the future when more capacity is required. We all know that more capacity will be required. So all our platforms are catered for increased train lengths. 2.5 foot mortgages. We've got ticket halls at each end. For Bond Street, the Western Ticket Hall is at the top of the Jubilee Line and connected direct to the Jubilee Line station. And the Eastern Ticket Hall is in Hanover's corner of Hanover Square. And the Hanover Square entrance will look something like that. Slightly different from Paddington. Here the ticket hall and the gate line is at ground level, and escalators will be down there onto the platforms. What we haven't forgotten is what happens outside the station, the urban realm, as the phrase is these days. And our station is the white bit at the bottom. We bought the land from that developer, Great Portland Estates, or Grosvenor Estates. One end is one end is the other, never remember which is which. We bought the land from them, compulsory purchase. We build our station, we design with them what we call an oversight development, building above it. We then lease it back to them, and so we get money back into Crossrail. They obviously rent out their office space, and they get their money back that way. So everybody wins. One thing wrong with that picture, as a great artist's impression, there's not nearly enough traffic on the roads. The first station to appear in public was Canary Wharf Station, Foster & Partners design. As I said, Canary Wharf nowhere to build anything except in the water, in the dock. So that's built in the North Dock of West India Dock. Some of you might have seen the programme on TV, the £15 billion railway, where they spent a lot of time with the team who were erecting those 3 ventilation ducts at the end, fitting them in. Well underway, station, now beginning to look very much like its artist's impression. And so much so that we've got one stage further. Again, remember, Canary Wharf Group, commercial organisation, the building a station, it's got to pay its way. So at the bottom we have our station platform, ticket hall above it, but there's 4 levels of retail above there. And they've already let the first concessions and named them. And they hope to have that open before Crossrail trains are running, so they can get some money going back in. Right at the top, we have the rooftop garden, and I jumped ahead of myself then. We've already, a bit of a press PR day that was, planting the first tree in August. However, it didn't just stop there and then go away. They're well underway with planting that roof garden there. And the roof there is exactly the same sort of roof as at the Eden Centre in Cornwall, with these translucent panels. But the larger gaps are open and the trees will be able to grow through. So you have this, it'll be open, but it's all protected. If you stand underneath it, will get wet when it rains. But it's open to allow trees to grow through. And that'll be a public garden above the shopping centre. A quick one on the external stations. The work on the external stations, the surface stations as we call them, is lagging behind, not lagging behind, it's the wrong word, it's not lagging. It does not need to start as early as the central area because there's plenty of time to do it. So we're just in the stage with Network Rail of putting out the designs and getting planning approval from the local authority. And 2 have already got out. One is Ealing Broadway, which at the second attempt has got approval from the local authority. A lot of public interest, a lot of local interest in getting that station right, a very, very busy station. Ilford Station, the other big one which is being developed, that is with the council at the moment. They're considering the proposals there, but it's entirely up to them. We just produce an outline proposal and they will tell us exactly what they want for their station. This is another one which has had its planning approval approved. This is what Harold Wood Station looks like today. And this is what our architect said it looks like tomorrow. And again, as with all this, it will have perspective seats. It's always bigger. Brand new bridge with access to all the platforms there, new lifts to all the platforms, and everyone is enormously happy with that. Access not only to the Crossrail platforms, it's access to the other platforms, which for the high-speed route, which of course doesn't always stop there. So again, much better improvements on the outside, but the most important thing is new access, new stairs, new lifts there. And that's already got planning approval. And the stage is sort of rolling through on all the other stations, both east and west. I can't say anymore because it just hasn't happened yet. Trains will look something like that. Contract was awarded to Bombardier. Trains will be up in Derby. They said they'll be 205 metres long, 204.9 metres long. We specified that we didn't want an off-the-wall great idea of new technology. We wanted tried and tested technology. So the trains are based on an existing design, but we wanted the latest updated version. They're lightweight. We said we wanted these 10-car trains, 200 metres long. What they've actually come up with is a 9-car train, 205 metres long. And that takes the weight out. One set of bogies has gone, the weight of the train is reduced. Weight reduces, wear is reduced on the track, energy consumption is reduced. The whole idea is it should be energy saving. They're going to support 1,000 UK jobs during the construction, and they have said they will create 100 apprenticeships. So we said we would create 400 apprenticeships during the construction of Crossrail. We're now up to 378 in that, so we're doing pretty well. I think it would have been a bit of a problem if the contract hadn't been awarded to Bombardier. It would have had more questions. However, I have seen the tender results, and virtually on everything they came out ahead of the other two bidders on this, particularly on their environmental side and on their community side, their support to the supporting jobs, supporting UK jobs, their procurement through UK firms. And not only will they be building the trains, they will be also building the depot, which will do an Old Oak Common at Kensington Green, and they'll also be providing maintenance for 30 years. It's all part of the package. That's what matters. Those who've been on the new Metropolitan and Circle Line trains, it probably looks something like that, with side seats and cross seats in probably colour something like that. We've got another artistic firm who were involved in the Olympics, involved in the actual interior design. One of the problems of opening this railway is, somebody talked earlier about the old railway companies. And you must remember that the railways were built in this country by lots of different companies. And so we're actually connecting three of them. We're connecting the Great Western on the west, the Great Eastern, and the Southern Railway. All of them have got slightly different signalling systems. It may be we've gone a long way now, but we haven't evolved into this grand European system yet, although we're getting towards it. And our trains are going to go through the centre. They're not going to be driverless, but they'll be automatically operated exactly the same way as the Victoria Line trains are through the centre tunnelling section. But when they come out of the tunnel at each end, they have got to slot in seamlessly to the signalling system and fit in with the other services that are running on those routes. So in order to do that, we will open the railway in stages and make sure each one works correctly before we add on the next one. And the first stage is going to be Liverpool Street to Shenfield in May 2017. However, we've already let the operating contract for this company. Some people might know the Hong Kong Mass Transit Railway, brackets Crossrail, who successfully run overground in cooperation with Deutsche Bahn, the most successful operated railway in the country, and that's how they got the contract on that. The and they will take over from the current franchisee next year. So Crossrail trains will run, taking over the Shenfield commuter short distance services in middle of 2015. We're not quite sure whether they're going to be branded Crossrail trains, but they use the existing stock. They will run that into Liverpool Street Station. But the new trains will come in 2017, and those stages will move in those stages. The important one to stage 3 there, which we guaranteed that the first train would run through the tunnel in December 2018. They'll run from Paddington out to Abbey Wood on the Kent commuter lines. And finally, the full service will be operating in stages by December 2019. And I just thought I'd add 2 seconds of a little bit there about what we're doing there. It's construction on the left and the operation on the right there. The big thing that on the economic side that we have enabled, let's say, 57,000 homes. And a long time ago, I walked down the East London line as it was before it was being built, and all the way down the project director said, new development there, there. And these are small developments, and the same thing is happening on the Crossrail. People now know that Crossrail. Before Crossrail was coming, we actually got tear-stained letters saying, on no account bring Crossrail here, it's driving property values down. Of course, now it's the opposite. And a lot of people are putting applications for development and quoting Crossrail as a reason for it. On the social side, 1.5 million people now are going to be within 45 minutes commuting distance of central London. I don't think that's a good thing. It's bad enough as it is. But people want to move into London. Somebody used that statistic a few months ago, which simply said the equivalent of an underground carriage of people are moving into London each day. Legacy of skills, expertise and experience. Most important, now we don't lose them, but we move on to the next phase. The environment side, there'll be quieter trains, 50% reduction. Energy improvements, these low trains, lower weight, better energy consumption. And under the stations as well. LED lighting will all be used. I mentioned skills. One of the things we had, problem, because we hadn't got this continuity of projects, there were no tunnels available in this country. They're all going to build tunnels in China. China building more underground tunnels in a day than we're building in a year, I think. So we built our own tunnelling academy at Ilford. Some people might have seen it when you go past on the train, that route to Ilford Station. Tunnelling an underground construction academy. I was there on Tuesday. Super place, and they train anyone who works underground. It says 372 apprentices. I said it's constantly going up. I said 378, a bit more than reduced that time. Over 8,000 people have now trained at this academy on all sorts of using plant, underground plant, tunnelling procedures. And as it says there, 755 people were previously unemployed. One of the reasons for building that place at Ilford was an area, as you probably know, of long-term unemployment. And we've got quite a few people of that 755 who were long-term unemployed and are now on well-paid jobs within the organisation. Most important in any project, you've got to have your political man behind you, otherwise you will not get anywhere. When Ken was in charge, Ken was a great Crossrail man. He set up an organisation to get businesses. He couldn't lobby himself, he got businesses on his behalf to do a lot of lobbying, which they did very successfully. We were a bit worried when Boris took over, he hadn't got that commitment. However, 2 days after taking office, he came down to speak to the company in a venue slightly bigger than this. And he said, get in that hole and keep on digging. So you must have that political behind you. So that is what we're doing, that's Crossrail doing. It's moving London forward.
got a question? Or
Any question?
the cam's going on. Ron, you can wait.
Yes,
Jim.
yes, to be.
Yeah, just one thing. You said it was an artist's impression, but you had a very nice picture of Harold Wood Station.
Yes.
I know Harold Wood, did you know it's local to us here?
Yes, I know, that's why I put it on, yes.
But it worries me, because you've succeeded in wiping out the car park. If you want people to go by train, how do they get there?
If you look at the plans, you'll see where the car park is, yes. It hasn't gone.
Much reduced by that stuff.
I don't know what it is. But if you look at the local authority website, have you done it already?
No, I just make the observation because around here, all of the car parks at all the stations are full up.
Yes, yeah.
Full.
I know, yeah.
How people expected to use it, I've no idea.
I don't know the detailed answer to that, but I do know that if you go on the local authority website, somebody asked exactly the same question, sometimes a similar question to that. They'll have it plans there, the detailed plans of exactly where the car park is based.
Okay, thank you.
How many trains have you ordered, actually?
65. I think it's 65, maybe 66.
Wow.
The answer is enough, I would say yes.
And a subsequent question. The drill, on average, how many feet does it move forward during a day when you've done tunnelling?
We worked on, this programme, on 100 metres a week. The best we achieved was 72 metres in a 24-hour period, and averaged about 35 metres a day. So,
Well ahead.
well ahead. We did not meet any serious obstructions. We met some small obstructions. We dug, I think we had 42 kilometres of tunnels. I think there were 3 times that length of trial boreholes were dug along the route. You will never ever find everything until you dig that under the ground. Most of the tunnels, no problem at all. Going through Canary Wharf, fun enough, came out of the station, ran into some piles, some steel piles. They put some trial piles into the dock when they built Canary Wharf. No one knew they were there. Not recorded any drawings or anything. They had to stop and cut those out. But yes, that was what we achieved. About average, probably about 30 metres a day. We always say they ran 7 days a week. They don't. About 6 days. 7th day is maintenance.
Okay.
George?
Are they wheelchair friendly for loading up?
Yes, yes. That's. We use this marvellous statement about step-free access. We love 3-letter abbreviation. Yes, they'll be foot level, like the new district line trains, level on the platform. All the new underground stations will have lifts from the street to the platform. In some cases, we've got, maybe it's easy to get them in, we've got inclined lifts, which I've always thought were super, as I've seen in other parts of the world. And the only one I've seen in this country is at the Millennium Bridge, which goes down there. And it therefore goes down alongside the escalator, which means if you can't get into the lift with your person in the wheelchair, you can go down alongside them. So I think it's a great idea. Yes, the answer is all the central section stations will be. All the stations on the eastern side now, this was announced recently, have extra money from outside Crossrail funds to bring extra lifts onto those stations. However, the existing stations will not be level access onto the trains. And that's due to the fact that we run freight trains through our stations which overhang. So you cannot make platforms and trains level outside the central area. But there will be balance.
Will the these trains replace the current suburban service?
Yes, it will. Yes, they will replace the current suburban services on the east and the west. In fact, they will also supplement the suburban service. There will be more suburban service on the east.
You mentioned, in fact, about the first railway revolution that happened in London, and one of the consequences of that was mass exclusion of people from their own homes, which were being demolished. And they were not given anything at all. Now, there must be some situations where you have to demolish houses or take over houses or factories for that matter. What is happening?
Right, okay. Central London. When you go through Central London, remember, it's the only bit of Central London we're worried about. Outside, we didn't do any land purchase at all. You look at it, you think lots of businesses. They're not. You go through Central London, most of the land is owned by large companies. In most cases, we were able, example I showed Bond Street Station, and we had one office block there, Great Portland Estates, and we took over their site there. No residential accommodation at all, purely office accommodation, replacement office accommodation. Tottenham Court Road, again, which I haven't shown there, there's a big commercial development going on over the station there. Again, there was no residential. There was a small number of residential businesses accommodation taken over Dean Street in Soho, where we provided these were all carefully looked at by our property people, and they were valued, and when necessary they went to arbitration and conciliation about approving the purchase of this. But very, very few residential areas need to be taken over. It's mainly commercial areas, commercial locations.
Last question, Ron.
Yes. Do you happen to know what, if any, ideas were put forward for an overground motorway system instead of underground?
Yes, why do you? Going back to Brunel now, he had problems of putting a overground route to the centre of London because it physically isn't room. You've got to demolish vast swathes of building to do that. Remember the outcry about the Buchanan, if you remember that? The great inner London motorway, in which two bits exist. And this is going to huge motorway ring, inner ring, running from Shepherd's Bush in the west, right round through Hackney, demolishing great swathes of London, which could never happen. And however, there was a suggestion which came through at the parliamentary stage. Someone suggested a monorail running through the centre of London. But his proposal, it was very much an individual proposal, it was such a lightweight construction that no way would it carry the number of passengers. The short answer is there isn't room to put something overground.
Thank you. Terry, would you like to give a vote of thanks on behalf of the club, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, for once again presiding over a fantastic lunch. And thank you to Patrick for a fantastic talk about the Crossrail and its street. We really appreciate it. It's for Patrick, please. Show of hands, please.
Patrick is draw out.
My friend of mine who also carries these presentations. Don't know how you can cut your talk down to half an hour. You know, I never speak for less than an hour and a half. Right. 286. 286.
You got 286, David?
I'm sure.
Somebody got it.
Well.
Hey!
Well done, David. Time it's withdrawn again, isn't it? Thanks, President. There you go.
286. Yes, Norman.
I've got a mention actually. The